I don't know if you saw it, like right after, maybe it was during the pandemic, there was this piece in the Atlantic. It was called It's Your Friends Who Break Your Heart. It was something like that. And it was basically articulating that we have all these protocols for how we handle like difficult parents and like therapies around, repairing romantic relationships. And we don't have that kind of lexicon or those tools to help us with our friendships. But as I think, I've been talking about, as we get older, our friendships become even that much more important to us. And we realize maybe we don't have great skills for recovering from tough setbacks or making new friends. Or there's lots of books out there on like how to repair love and find love and maintain love. But I'm not sure there's as many books about doing that with friends.
Hey friends, welcome to The Good Life with Michele Lamoureux, a show for women in midlife who want to live happier, healthier, and more meaningful lives. I'm your host, Michele Lamoureux, a self-love coach and the author of Design a Life You Love. And together we're going to be doing just that. Each week I bring on world-class experts, best-selling authors, leading entrepreneurs, and also do solo casts with the intention of inviting you to get connected to what you really desire from your life. This show is produced with love every week. There's inspiration and actionable tips in every episode because I want to see women playing a starring role in their lives instead of living on the sidelines. Be sure to join the Good Life community newsletter over at thegoodlifecoach.com for more inspiration and tips to live your best midlife. And make sure you're following the show on your favorite podcast player. I'm so glad that you're here. Hey there, it's Michele, and welcome back to the show. I'm excited about today's conversation because friendships are so critical, and we're going to be talking about friendships, different kinds of relationships at work, with trying to make friends in midlife. And joining us today for this conversation is Nayla Bahri. I want to say it like more Middle Eastern. How do you pronounce it, Nayla?
I say Bahri because I'm actually,
Bahri.
Yeah, that's how I've been socialized to say it. Yeah,
Same.
But we share that Middle Eastern heritage.
We do. So let's
let's lean into it.
Let's lean into that. I'm realizing our differences are our superpowers. So I'm trying to embrace that more. So Nayla has actually been a guest before. We had a fantastic conversation. I'm going to link that in the show notes so you can listen to that one too. That was really around work and career. And in fact, Nayla is an executive coach, an educator, facilitator, and co-host of the Inside Job podcast. Her mission is to help everyone she collaborates with create their ideal relationship with work, one that lets them thrive, experience more satisfaction and flow, and deliver excellence. Her clients include individual leaders and teams across organizations and levels, and she works with numerous companies, including Apple, American Express, the Royal Bank of Canada, ABC, Disney. Nayla served as the Dean of Students at Columbia Business School for 15 years, where she coached and taught thousands of students and co-founded the Leadership Lab, the clearinghouse for leadership activities for MBA and EMBA students. Welcome back, Nayla. I'm so excited to have you back on the show.
I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to be talking about this topic because it just generates so much thought and feeling for me about friendship and friendships at work and friendships outside of work and friendships at midlife, all these things that we're experiencing.
Totally. And it's interesting because it changes. I think the way we make friends when we're younger, there's so many built-in systems. You go to whatever, it's high school, then college, then work, which is what we'll start with, and then maybe whatever outside activities. But then as you get older, it's like a lot of times it's geared around if you have children, but a work environment in theory is like a great place, but not necessarily one that, I don't know, a lot of people think about. And before our interview, I actually Googled friendships at work. And there was a recent article from the Harvard Business Review. There was one from Time. Like this has been covered. And they actually say that your performance, your level of job satisfaction, your desire to stay at a place actually is impacted by friends. But I'd love to get your insight into this since, careers are this is your thing.
Careers are definitely my thing. Work is my thing. And I think friendship might be my thing too. As I was reflecting, when you came up, when you wrote back to me and said, hey, why don't we talk about this? I started thinking about my own life and my friendships and my female friendships in particular, um, and how it has helped me grow. There, I do remember I actually did a long LinkedIn reflection on a piece that was in the New York Times, maybe at this point more than a year ago, because I remember writing it in the Sun last summer. And it was about how those first friendships that you form in your early work really help you grow up. And I think you're
Mm,
absolutely right that friendship and even just more casual relationships are baked into high school and college because of just we're with a group of people.
sure.
There's
Yeah.
infrastructure there for us. And for a lot of us, and it's something I'm thinking a lot now as I have a 19-year-old, but for back when I started my first jobs in the 90s, where we entered like as classes of early in career professionals. Like, I had a lot of friends like me who worked in law firms or who went to investment banking or other kinds of companies where they would onboard like class from either 12 to maybe 100 people.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
kind of enter with this cohort, and it
Yes.
becomes very easy to have that first set of friends at work. And this article went on to explain how formative those friends are at helping you understand your own career aspirations, which is what caught my
Mm.
eye and my ear. Like those, for me, that law firm, those long, long hours, and very obviously within a week, believing and understanding that I do not belong in a law firm any more
Wait,
than I belong.
wait. What were you? Were
I
you?
was a paralegal.
Did we not talk? So I was a paralegal. That was my first
No.
job out of college.
Wait, can I ask what your major was in college?
It was political science and
Okay.
education minor. What was
Okay,
yours?
so mine was English and French. I had two majors, and
Okay.
this is what English made. I mean, you would basically, the way it was is like you either went down the PhD in English route, which I was not going to do,
Yes.
or people said to you, well, you're a strong writer, you should become an attorney. So a lot of us went to law firms, and within like 15 minutes, I was like, oh, this is not for me. But
Oh, you
I,
knew right
I
away.
knew right away. But you know why I stayed for a full year?
Okay.
Because I had made friends at work and I loved them. And we were having so much fun. Like it was terrible work at once because it was so long. And I mean, the hours were terrible. And I remember doing an awful lot of filing and stapling, getting yelled at by partners. But we were doing it with all these I'd met all these great kids from all over the country. We were brought in this like class. I mean, there must have been 80 of us, and we were given a floor. We all had office mates. It almost felt like an extension of college.
Wait, this was a large law firm.
Large law firm in New York City in the mid 90s.
Okay. Okay. This is so fun because that's how I started at work. And I always thought I was going to be an attorney. And so
Mm.
they were like in a liberal arts college, they're like political science is a good entree. And so I did that. And then I went in and it was this smaller firm at the time, but ended up going to the third largest law firm. And I actually ended up going from paralegal to the director of marketing by the time I was 27. Yes, I ended up staying, Nyla, because I loved it. But I interviewed kind of as my curiosity. Here I am with my podcast. I would go and talk to every lawyer that I worked with. I'm like, hey, what do you love about what you do? They're all like, don't go to law school. Go get your MBA. They literally 90% of them told me to get my
Wow.
MBA. They're like, if you get your JD, get an MBA too. Like nobody was like, yes, go to law school. It was really interesting. I mean, I was a good paralegal and I would never say no to any project. So I was like there and I loved it. But there was
That's
definitely a
funny.
social aspect to it too. You know, it was just a young firm. Everyone
Yes.
was really fun and cool. And so I was like crying when I left as a paralegal.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to miss these people. It was 2 years for me. But
Yeah.
but I had decided during that time I wasn't going to law school and I didn't know what was next.
Mm. I knew pretty fast I wasn't going to law school, but I stayed longer than I should have. In retrospect, and it wasn't really for a great reason. I was living at home, so I didn't have expenses, and my parents were pretty much like, "Yeah, it's clear you don't belong here." But I had met a handful of people who I felt like I was in it with them.
Yeah.
One of whom I'm still close to this day. I mean, now it's 30 something years and I'm still close to him. We don't speak as frequently, but I mean, there was a time where he was like my person. He was my
Oh,
best friend. And
oh,
he was a guy who also said to me, you don't belong here. Like, it's so evident that like, you're not interested in what we're doing. And so that article that we're referencing, that New York Times article, was really about how much we learned from those friends. And I always credit him and then another woman I met at the next job I had for helping me figure out I was in the wrong place. And I think that's just like one of the funny benefits you don't expect from friends at work. You think, well, we're going to have a great time together. We're single and there's no kids. So we're going to go out after work and we'll like make fun of the bosses behind their backs and do all those friend things. But in fact, these two people Chris and Sarah, who I've thanked for this before, were two people who looked at me multiple times in the times that we worked together and said, like, you really, what you talk about and what you're interested in, and when you light up, it has nothing to do with what we're doing here. So I would pay attention to that. And it's really shaped so much of how I think about work.
That's so interesting. And one of my best friends, I'll give Sunshine a shout out. I was a corporate paralegal. She was a litigation paralegal, and she was moving back to California. And we kind of met at the end of like both of our time there. And I was in her wedding. I mean, we've been friends since, and we realized we had so much in common. So it's just funny. But my next step was because of another friend that I grew up with. It was like, oh, you should try recruiting, like headhunting. And so I went into executive search, which I absolutely hated.
That's funny.
But it's how I learned about marketing. So yes, so it's interesting. So the friendships is at probably even at any time can like direct maybe what you explore.
Yeah, I think if we let them, right? Because I think there's so many reasons to have friends at work. And it's, as you're mentioning, like the stuff you've been reading, and the evidence that having a good friend leads to better engagement. I don't know if you've ever worked for an organization that used a Gallup type survey, like for engagement surveys.
Yeah.
So Gallup's, I think, one of the biggest providers of these surveys. And they have a pretty well-known question, which is, yes, no, I have a best friend at work. And when you first read that question, you're kind of like, what are we doing here? But then it correlates to the literature that suggests that our engagement level and our performance grows if we have someone we call a best friend at work, which of course we can get into, like what allows us to have best friends at work and whether there is a distinction, what kinds of distinctions there are between our work friends and our, air quote, real friends.
Yes.
But I do think, to your question, like if we let someone see us, if we can become open and disclose safely at work around what we're enjoying or what people are observing about us, and even calling it feedback if we want to, I think that our friends at work can be the most instructive, right? Because all of us put a little bit of a face on for our bosses, especially early in career, right? But then you come back to your office or your cubicle or your floor and you're like, oh my God, I either messed this up or I'm really frustrated by this, or I hate this part, or I wish they would give me more work around this part. And your friends hopefully are paying attention to that and they can help you plan and think and brainstorm. I mean, I think that's one of the great benefits, especially early in career, of having friends at work, is that they help you see yourself in a way that sometimes we fail to see what's right in front of us. But again, that requires that we let people in a little bit. But I also think at that age, we're probably more open to it than we are as we get older.
Totally are. We totally are. And that can be wonderful. And then also it can be truly painful. So I had an experience in my early career where there was a woman who I thought was truly like my best friend at work. And we hung out outside and we really were close. At least I thought we were. But I should have paid attention to the red flags, like the way she would talk about her roommates. And I never met her roommates, but all I knew about, was one had halitosis and the other, I was like, why are you telling me that? Like, I don't want to know that about someone who's your friend. And then at some point I did meet that woman. Like, that's like the first thing I'm thinking about, because she kept and I was like, I remember you sort of brush it aside and you don't think about it. But when I, went from paralegal, went to recruiting, and then went into marketing. When I left, I had told her, I was like, if people come by, they know we're so close, just give them my number. I'm not obviously going to shoot it out in an email to, the whole firm. And I ran into a few people from the firm. They were like, yeah, we went and talked to so-and-so. And she said, you weren't interested in staying connected. And I was like, what? That's so weird. It's so weird. So I started putting a little bit of distance, and then I came back in as in marketing. And then 6 months later, I was like a marketing assistant. And then by 6 months later, I got promoted. It was kind of a crazy situation.
Yeah.
So got all these emails, congrats, not from her. And then this young guy came, and I never worked with him, but he was still in her department. And he was like, so-and-so said you didn't want anyone to bother you, but I just really wanted to say congratulations. And I was like, whoa, this is really weird. And so what happened is that there were certain people that I thought I was friends with, that she was friends with. Who knows? Maybe she told them I had halitosis, because they really looked at me like I was a leper and like some horrible person. So what I took away from that was, A, keep the distance, because clearly she's not the friend I thought she was. So I'm benefiting. And two, anyone who's actually listening to whatever she's selling, doesn't really care about me and really know me. So I'm okay with
Yeah.
that too. Like she's
Yeah.
done me a favor. But it,
Yeah.
it
Oh,
hurt.
it hurt. Oh my
Oh
goodness.
man, I was like blindsided because like there was multiple situations like that where people were like, she said, you didn't want this. And I was like, okay.
Oh, and that's, you know
So
what, I think it just makes me hurt for you. And I mean, of course, I've been there, and everyone's, I think, been there, where I mean, there's so many illusions created by the proximity and the volume of time we spend together with people at
yeah.
work, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure I said this to you last time I visited your show, that we spend 90,000 hours of our lives at work. That's the number. And that is I mean, it's more
For
time
a
than I'll spend with my,
lifetime,
over a lifetime, the average
that's
American.
insane. Yeah.
Well, it's really insane when you consider, like, it's the biggest volume of hours we'll spend on any conscious activity. We should sleep about 123,000 hours of our lives, but I'm a middle-aged woman. I don't sleep that much, but it's more time than I'll spend with my kids, with my partner. Like it's
Yes.
the most time dominant activity of our lives. So it's really easy to see how we start to confound and start to create stories around how intimate we are with people, what a friendship means to us
Yes.
relative to what it might mean to them.
Yes.
And, just it's so easy. I can imagine myself, I can picture myself in my 20s, like the illusion of time being like, well, we're so close because we spent so much time together and we do things
Totally.
together, right? We
Yes.
solve problems together and we get, bitched at by our bosses together, and we survive difficult long nights at the office together, and maybe we even travel together or we play together. So I remember also the devastation of leaving a job and then realizing the friendship didn't have legs. Like once the context was gone,
Oh,
there's not a lot there. And for years, these people, I mean, I'm picturing the face of one woman in particular. For years, she'd been like my co-pilot professionally.
yeah.
She'd been with me for years, again, troubleshooting and venting. And we'd both gotten married and had our children at the same time. We were all at work at the same time this was happening. And
Yeah.
then when she left and I left quickly thereafter, a year later, we felt like strangers. And it was so baffling to me because for so many years, we'd been so intimate. And she knew everything about my struggles and my hopes and my aspirations. And she'd watch me, cry after a tough meeting. She'd watch me celebrate after promotion. I had done the same for her. And then it's like, oh, you kind of change the scenery and there's nothing there. And that was really hard. I remember that pain very acutely.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you saw it, like right after, maybe it was during the pandemic, there was this piece in the Atlantic. It was called "It's Your Friends Who Break Your Heart," something like that. And it was basically articulating that we have all these protocols for how we handle like difficult parents and like therapies around, repairing romantic relationships. And we don't have that kind of lexicon or those tools to help us with our friendships. But as I think, I've been talking about, as we get older, our friendships become even that much more important to us. And we realize maybe we don't have great skills for recovering from tough setbacks or making new friends. Or there's lots of books out there on like how to repair love and find love and maintain love. But I'm not sure there's as many books about doing that with friends.
Wow. This is so good. This is so good because everything you're saying it like hit me when you were talking about that woman and how much you share and you care about them. And I think, Nayla, you and I are the same in the sense that like our people are our people. We've got their backs. We're rooting for them. We want the best for them. There's like, as if there's something secret or something, that they're sharing, you will go to the grave with it. I just
Right.
can sense that that's who
Right.
you are.
Yes.
And like,
It's
that's
very,
me.
like I honor friendships and relationships very strongly. Like they matter a ton to me.
Me too. So me too. So when you were talking about that, I guess like I'm talking about it like, oh, I'm fine with it. But no, at the time it was confusing and deeply painful. But it's interesting because now as we are in midlife and I'm talking about, a lot of what we're talking about is tune out everyone else and get really connected to that inner voice of yours and go for it because, people are going to talk, people are going to say things and you don't want to hold them back. And I will say, that situation didn't hold me back. I loved my job. I was committed to it and I had the best time in my job and I found my people. And, two of the women who worked with me in my department, we were all around the same age because I was promoted I was 27 when I got the job and it was the ninth largest law firm at the time. It was third by the time I left. We were the same age. They were at my wedding. I loved these women. I love them. And did we hang out outside of work? No, but I loved them.
Right.
I love them and I wanted them there. So, you said we could talk about sort of like the different layers, but maybe that's a transition into it.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I used to have this friend in college who would say, like, when we were becoming friends, when I went to a women's college, so this is like, lot of talk about friendship and lots of instant friendships. That's kind of like just add water friendships that you realize over time there's just it's not going to live, but you tried. And she would always say to me, there's a distinction between the people I really love to talk to, like the people like you who I really want to be around and confide in, and then what she would call action friends, like people I do things with. And they might,
Hmm.
like I need action friends. And I think I underestimated in my early days how much I needed action friends because I always wanted big, intense, like super profound friendships. That's the kind of thing I'm drawn to. I, like you, have friends I've been friends with for 25, 30, 40 years. I maintain this small but very intimate group of people around me. But I'll always remember my friend saying, "You need action friends. You need friends to do things with who
Yes.
maybe your closest friends don't share, a growing interest in whatever your hobby or traveling to a particular part of the country or the world, and you need someone to do those things with." And I've been thinking about that lately because I think as I'm in midlife and I still have my intimate friends, and yet there's things I'm developing a curiosity for, or have hobbies or practices around. And I'm like, I need people to do those things with. And my maturation as a human is being like, okay, I don't have to have all my friends do exactly what I love to do, but I got to find people to do those things with. And when we talk about like different layers of friendships or different kinds of friendships, I think those are some of the things that I didn't understand in my 20s, which is why I could be so profoundly hurt, I
Yes.
think, in my 20s, or even my 30s, because I thought,
Yes.
well, if we are on a similar timeline, family wise, and we do similar work, and we seem to have comparable values around that work, then that must mean we're like soulmates. It must mean that we're going to be friends forever. And
Mm.
I think that's part of the mess that we get into is like, yeah, forgetting that context change and that our needs for friendship must be met by a number of different people. And I'm sure in your life, you have friends who are like more casual friends who are like, I'm just so happy to see you on the tennis court or so happy to see you wherever I see you. And I'm probably not going to call you between now and the next time we bump into each other. And that's okay.
Yeah,
Versus the friends you can't go a week without talking to at like,
totally. Totally. Or the ones that you literally know you could call at 2 a.m. and they're going to pick up the phone and it's totally good. Or even those friends you don't see for a year and you pick up right where you left off. And it's so comfortable and like amazing. But you used a word, you said work, you share the same values at work
yeah.
for work. So as coaches too, we know the importance of your value system. And one of the values that I hold is integrity, and another is loyalty, and another is friendship. So that woman violated all. There was no
Yeah.
integrity in that, and there was no loyalty,
Yeah.
and clearly didn't. Maybe she values other friendships, but not mine. You know what I mean? So whether there was a little
Yeah.
bit of envy, because one of the other guys that we were both friends with came in, he's like, "What about so and so? Like I had left her behind." I'm like, she doesn't want to be head of marketing. Like, and even if she, like, that's not my fault if I got a job that I was
Yeah.
suited for. Do you know, it was just a weird comment. And I was like, well, what about me? What
Yeah.
about me? What about congratulations? You know?
So, I mean, you just said something like, I think when I think about like some of the pitfalls we have with friendships, and, this could be work and it could be otherwise. I think envy is one of those things that like we don't expect to see show up in our friendships. Like maybe we expect it with our siblings or, those kinds of relationships where, especially when your parents are still playing a role in measuring your expectations or all that stuff that you and I have talked about in the past. But I think often with our friends, we figure, well, there'll be abject joy for one another's accomplishments. All we're going to do is root for each other. All we're going to do is feel awesome about each other's accomplishments. But I definitely have observed. I remember on my team at Columbia, I had a number of young people who worked on my team, and it was an interesting thing to observe. Like somebody would accelerate, and then you'd see factions start to form because they had been friends, and now somebody was the boss over other, women who she'd been their colleague for years. Or you'd see
Yes.
someone
Well, if
get
I had
married.
been her boss, I almost could see it a little bit, but I wasn't. We were in
Right. But
totally
you see,
different
realize, but
departments.
like maybe it's not about direct supervision, but it's about like acceleration. Who seems to have power? Who
Right.
seems to have
Oh, yeah.
clarity? Right. Even
Yes.
to be the friend who knows what they want and who's able to
Wow,
navigate and
this is
build
good.
relationships. I remember watching these young women, and one of them she was just on a different timeline. Like she was a little more clear on her future. She was very ambitious. She also got married first. And that was kind of another weird dynamic to be thrown in there so that, you want a friendship to have this kind of mutual support.
Yes.
And we all have to face what happens when someone who's our friend starts getting things we want faster than we're getting them, or differently, right? They get touched by, someone, the senior level administration to say, hey, I think there's an opportunity for you elsewhere. You get plucked and put somewhere else, or you get attention for an accomplishment. It's very interesting because
that is interesting.
We're friends, but we're also, maybe there's a little competition. There's a little bit of like, yeah, I mean, I watched it happen and I have seen it. I've been in there with those shoes, of course, myself, because who hasn't? But it's always interesting because we want our friendships to be pure, but you throw in a work context, you throw in anywhere where resources seem a little scarce, attention, promotion, pay, and strange things start to happen.
Wow. This is so good. It's so true. I do wonder, and I don't know how connected you are to it. Like, we're talking about when you were younger and the dynamics, and we've navigated and we've had the broken hearts from those losses. Like you said, not enough discussion is around those truly important relationships and having your heart broken. I'm just wondering, is it harder like in midlife, and if everyone's working on screens now, like what does that look like in terms of, because I have to say there was something nice, walking in, talking to the receptionist. I literally had her one day. I was in Boston and somebody beeped at me, and it was the woman who used to be the receptionist at the law firm. I hadn't seen her in 10 years. And we're like, oh my God, how's your daughter? We were like, it was so nice to see her. But like, just even those, the water cooler talk, or like those interactions, they also feed your soul in some meaningful way too. So what do we know about this?
Well, I hear two different things in there. One is the question about proximity. And one is the question about middle age or older life.
Yes.
So let's talk about the first one first, because I've not looked deep into the data on this, and I know it's starting to be. I mean, we're not going to know for years what this period of time has done to us or is doing to us. What I can tell you, anecdotally, is that, I think there's a cost. We gain so much by having the freedom to work where we want to work, right? I love being able to be in my home and go to the gym and be around the dog, and when my kids are home, see them. But I know I have, and this is, so I won't even use myself now because I work for myself. But for instance, when I left Columbia, I worked for an organization where I worked at home 2 or 3 days a week, and I went to the office 2 or 3 days a week. And how I spent my time was totally different. So I was able to benefit from the casual interactions and, I guess we still call it water cooler talk, but the meeting between the meetings, right?
I just dated myself now, Nayla.
I don't know. Are there water coolers?
I have no idea. Let's just say at the coffee, there's probably a coffee machine. Yeah.
I think I called it a break room on a podcast the other day. And
That's funny.
I'm officially 100. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Okay. Apparently I'm 200. So yeah.
Okay.
Although I doubt they had water coolers 200 years ago, but anyway.
But I think we do benefit, especially if we're talking about the friendship side of the house.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of work to be done around understanding how work gets done in the margins like that. But certainly from a friendship perspective, you get to kind of chit chat, right, in a way that's harder now, for sure. Conversely, I think what I notice is that virtually, especially if you're someone who's committed to it, you can now have connections. Like I have colleagues on the West Coast, yourself included, all over the country, where now because time seems to be spread a little more evenly between my Zoom calls, I might spend as much time small talking with someone who I'm working with who's in New York, 22 miles from me, or someone who's in California, thousands of miles from me. So I think it's really about our choice, like how deliberate we are about investing in, I don't like to call it small talk, but maybe that kind of informal, friendly talk.
Yes.
I think that we're definitely going to be seeing differences in how rapport is built. And, the article, again, that we started this conversation referencing, a lot of the questions raised in there was like, what happens to our young people who are starting their jobs from their home offices or kitchen tables or whatever? Well, my 19-year-old works for a small healthcare company right now. She does social media for them just for the summer. But because of virtual work, her boss is almost never in the office when she's in the office. So my daughter goes in the morning, and her boss is still at home and gives direction and coaching over the phone or through Zoom. And so now my daughter's learning, but she's like, we don't have the chance to kind of build that casual rapport and trust that you can have in other contexts. So, it's something we all are going to have to figure out how to navigate.
Totally.
I don't know if there's great answers right now.
No, it's true. And then in midlife, I don't know how much of a priority it is for a woman, in her 40s or 50s who's going into the workplace to have those friends. Because just like us, they could have the childhood friend, the friends from high school, the friends from their early work days, the friends
Yeah.
from playing tennis. Like they may just want the time with their families. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like any free time they have, it may not really be about that. But I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, if you, I'm wondering if like that kind of conundrum for the women who are our age and are as busy and have rich lives, is for work or not work. You know what I'm saying? I think that kind of, are we devoted enough and have we prioritized enough to make friends in adulthood? I think is a question we can ask ourselves with or without work.
Mm.
And if the Surgeon General came out and said like loneliness is the biggest
Yeah,
national,
he wrote a book about it.
yeah, right. And
Yeah,
it's kind of spewed all this kind of additional research and writing and thinking around like the state of friendships in adulthood and these kind of hypotheses about why we're not great at friendship and why so many people, I think the numbers are really astonishing. It's something like more people now say they have like maybe fewer friends in any period in documented history, or Americans at
mm-hmm.
least. And there was this thing that came out saying it's a survey center on American life or national life. And it says that many Americans, like the number of Americans who report they don't have a single close friend has like exponentially grown in the last 20 years.
Mm,
And there's all these reasons people think it could be true. We work too much. We parent very differently than our parents parented. Like we're way more involved with our kids.
totally.
Um, and I think it just kind of created this collective just disregard for friendships. And even those of us, I mean, I can think of so many women I know who say like, it matters to me so much to be close to my friends and to be a good friend, but I don't do it. I don't make time for it. I don't prioritize it. I kind of hang out with the same 2 or 3 people because it's easy, or because our spouses are also friendly, or because, we do have that thing. We play tennis or we attend the same church or whatever. But I think what ends up happening for us is we get out of the habit. I mean, I can say this, and I can say it about many of the people I'm close with. It's a habit to make time to get off the couch, even though you're tired, to make plans and keep them, to learn a new thing together or try a new thing together. And I think too many people I know have fallen out of the habit, and it's so easy to do other things that are less energetically expensive, like watch a movie or do nothing.
That's true. Yeah.
But I think we feel the vacancy. I don't know a single person who's like, oh, you know what I do spend too much time doing is hanging out with people I love. I don't see that as a problem that people are having.
No, it's totally true. And as you're talking, I was thinking about two things. I think women, especially, I do think women our age want meaningful relationships because a couple of things are happening. One is we don't give a shit about what people think as much. So we've taken stock of like who's in our life, and maybe some people have fallen away, and we're good with that, right? And on the other side, though, there's still the desire to make those meaningful relationships, and it can be sort of awkward, especially when you're doing it through school engagement, right? Like whether your kids are little or, in their high school, or you're like trying to make friends. I know for me, when my daughter went to preschool, I'm an extrovert. I had stopped working, which was such a big part of my soul and identity and joy. But I chose to stop. And I realized like I would show up at school, like I say, I like to go deep, kind of, not fast, but like I really want to know about somebody. So I was more curious about who they were versus like, oh, so and so excited to have a play date with your daughter. I'm like, I can't have these kinds of conversations. Like this is I cannot talk like this. I will not. And so it was hard for me to find my way. And I'm so grateful. I would say I added 2 amazing women into my life. And I'm just grateful that I found them. One was through like an interest of mine. I love French. There's a French cultural center in the neighborhood. And when my daughter was a year, I took her to French class because of course she needed that. I mean, I needed it, right? And I found one of my best friends there, Alexandra, whose daughter was 9 months older, and we've been friends since. And she's one of the most amazing women. So I feel super grateful to have found that. But part of me also thinks like if we were going on a dating app or meeting, like going in a room to meet 30 guys, if you found one guy that you thought was like somebody you wanted to date, you'd be
Those
doing
odds,
well. I
yeah,
don't
those
think
odds are
it's
good. Yeah. Yeah.
right. Like, so I don't actually think it's that different with friendships, especially as we're older and a little bit more discerning about what we're willing to, like,
Yes.
what we truly desire out of a friendship. And it can be an action friend. Like, yeah, you want to go
Sure.
play pickleball? Sure, let's go do that. But we don't have to, like, we're not going to talk about the things that are keeping me up at night.
Right. I love that you're saying this because I think that's true. I think it goes back to how we hold different standards for ourselves and for how we are in those relationships when it comes to romance and when it comes to friendship. I think, I don't know why it seems to us like we should be friends with everybody we meet just because we have something in common, which might be the kids. My oldest daughter will sometimes say to me, "You're not really friends with my friend's parents." And I'm like, yeah, I know that's on purpose. Like, sorry, but
That's
like,
by choice. Yeah.
yeah, like there's a point at which you know yourself and you realize how little time you have for anything and how precious it is. And when you really have a friendship, whether it's long term or even temporary, what the difference is between spending time with someone who like where that connection exists and that presence exists, and the difference between these like BS crap at the side of the fields, or I can only do that for so long. Like you, like my fuse for that is quite short. And I was probably the mom on the blacktop who was like, drop kid off, tear back to the car because I couldn't participate. I found it so hard to participate in that, all that kind of, I don't know, it's like that kind of sugar coated crap. I just couldn't deal with it. And when you know the real thing, you become very selective, but still, I think we do expect that I should be able to make new friends of meaning faster because we don't use the same level of discernment or allow ourselves the same level of discernment we do for romantic love, where we're like, I'll know when I know, and it's okay if like, you're a good guy, but not for me. With a friend, I wish we could be as like, yeah, you're a great girl, but like, I just don't think it's working. This isn't going to go anywhere. And that's
Yeah.
actually okay. And that frees
Yeah.
both of us up to find a friendship that's got more to offer us. I
Yeah.
wish. I mean, I hope for our kids they can do that.
It's funny what you said about the drop off. I would walk to school because we lived literally a few blocks away. And so it was a neighborhood school. And so there was a lot of foot traffic, if you will. So you were having that, but it was really funny to me to like, I was like, who are you? Who is this woman who's so socially awkward walking up and like so like deeply uncomfortable, dreading the drop off and pick up? Because that's not really my personality. And I can talk to, engage with people, but it was just, I don't know. It was just not something I enjoyed. And yeah, I remember thinking, oh gosh. And like some of the women, it just seemed so effortless. They had their
Yeah.
crew and I was like, good for you. I was like, I'm not finding that. And I also would laugh. Like I remember some of the little parties at the school and the dads, I always find that I got along with the dads. They're just more chill. And I don't know. And I remember hanging out with a couple and they're like, women are so mean to each other, and they
Well, we
just,
are. We can be, it's for sure.
for sure,
For
for
sure we can
sure.
be.
And
Yeah.
so, I just always found like I could hang with the dads really easily and really
Yeah.
be laughing and enjoying myself. When we were like, it wasn't like, hey, let's go hang out. It was just a comfort level where I didn't feel that awkwardness,
Yeah.
which is funny. I don't know. I never really had that dynamic before, and I didn't understand where it was coming from.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, one of the things I used to pay attention to was like there were a handful of us, especially I'm thinking about when my oldest one worked, was, kindergarten, first, second, third grade. Like we didn't just work, we worked like a lot. Like there were a number of us who worked very like time consuming jobs away from the area at the time. We all worked in New York and, I live in northern New Jersey. So most of us were kind of watching, like if we could even do drop off, we were watching the clock pretty carefully because we had to get, in for a particular set of meetings. And it did create these kind of little factions, and then I remember getting a little bit of BS from some women who because I worked so much and I worked away from the house, I was very selective about where I could volunteer. And, I live in a community where the schools are really, I mean, the parents play an enormous role in running things around here. And I couldn't be one of those parents for those first few years. And I remember getting like a little talking to by another mom. And I was like, dude, have my back here. Like, find a way I can be involved rather than getting
Judging
on
you.
my
She's
case
judging
because I
you.
can't show up at 11 a.m. in the morning. Um, but that's your comment about like, I think also what makes us a little gun shy. I think all those little like nicks and scratches in our psyche, like, you start becoming a little more cautious and a little more careful and a little more. I mean, I know I did because I
It's
walk in, I
interesting.
generally, like, I would say I'm really open hearted and I'm because I'm so interested in people and human stories and connecting and in love, like I'm like, let's do this. And then when those like those micro abrasions happen, you're like, oof, like I don't know if I can keep exposing myself this way. And I think that's part of why, when you ask, why does it get harder when we get older? Yeah, we spent too much time on other things, or we've made choices about where to spend some time. But also, I think we've been hurt. And so we get more and more careful.
I think that's so true. And all those words you use to describe yourself, 100%. And so that was me every day with like open heart and like, tell me about who you are and like what matters to you. And it's like, let's not talk about the play dates. And
it's so interesting as you're talking, because like I don't know that it makes sense to do this, but in my mind I'm filtering like the kinds of relationships we have into these like three broad categories, right? Because we have like our family, right? Like our parents, our siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, all that kind of stuff, extended family of origin plus extended family. And then you have your partner or spouse. And it's not to say that everyone ends up in a long-term monogamous relationship, but you know, I've been with the same guy I've been married to for 23 years, been together for 25 years. And then we have our friendships. And it's like, in a way, it's like, I do think there's so much to prepare us, or at least attempt to prepare us for how to be a good sibling or daughter, or a good partner, and so little about how to prepare us for how to be a good friend. And there's so much churn in that third category, right? Because like your parents' relationship, it could be tumultuous and difficult, but you've got the same set of people you're trying to figure it out with for the bulk of your life. Your partner, maybe, I mean, I hope for us, like same person for the bulk of my life. I'm trying to figure out how to be in relationship with this one person for the bulk of my life. Same thing with my kids.
Yeah.
Throw friends. It's like a constantly changing cast of characters. Contexts are changing all the time. I mean, you know, we're talking about my high school friends or my work friends from this job versus that job, or, you know, the friends who my kids were friends with when they were in elementary school versus who their friends are now in college. And you realize that it's like a constantly rotating cast of characters with scene changes like every 2 or 3 years. And we wonder why it can be so confusing and so hard.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the landscape is constantly changing and the players are constantly changing.
Yeah.
And as I was listening to you talk about like the difference between a school in Boston and a school in California, you're like, no wonder it's hard. You know, so much has changed between those two places. And then throw in kids of varying ages and our jobs and our communities and things that we're involved with. Yeah, no wonder we're so tired.
Oh, right. Or like you said, the expectations or the judgment that, you know, there's this idea that there's the stay-at-home moms and then the working moms, and they're like at odds about, you know, who's doing it the right way or something. Right. It's just like, let's just all get along. But no, I like the buckets that you did. I mean, let's go with that. I think that's interesting. And I think though, also to go back, I read that Gallup study because when I Googled friendships at work, that pulled up. And they kept quoting, you know, there's the reference to the Good Life guy who did the longevity study.
Yeah, the Harvard study.
Yeah, the Harvard study, I should say. Yeah, but it was also not longevity. I'm going to get to that one too. But the Harvard study, of course, it was all on men until recently. But how important friendships are. And then, you know, and I can't speak to how men make friends because I feel like that is a whole other, guys relate differently, in my opinion. And then second, was the guy who did do the longevity. So he studies the centenarians, the blue zones, Dan Buettner. And, you know, one of the 9 things to help create a long life and live as long and healthy as you can is to have those people, that community and those friendships. And so we know that. And then you're quoting how we're having, you know, it's just grown in terms of like the disparity between those numbers of what it used to be in terms of saying you have the close friend and most people feeling lonely. We're engaging through screens. We're not going to talk about our kids because that's a whole other, you know, their navigation. But we know, especially, I think, you know, we both have daughters. Those friendships are so important from such a young age and watching them navigate. And then sometimes I'm like, I don't know that what I have to offer is relevant anymore in terms of like how it is. And also, I do have my people, my Stephanie, I know you listen to the show. I love you. I've known her literally since birth. She grew up, you know, a house away from me. My friend Jen from college, listen, I love you too, Jen. You know, I really appreciate it. But, you know, I go home now. And since COVID, I used to see my college friends once a year. I don't. So like, Jen, I'm sorry I haven't seen you in, you know, 4 years of the rest of the crew. Like I loved getting together with my friends, but I got so nervous about bringing COVID into my parents' house and I prioritized them. So maybe it's just where we are in life and what we're doing with work and where we are with work and where we are with our priorities. things shift around. But we have to come back to the fact that friendships are so important. So
Yeah.
have you added any on, Nyla? And like
In adulthood?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I want to be careful about saying I've been lucky because I make work of it, right?
Okay.
And I think that's the takeaway as I'm listening to you talk about like your summary of where we are. It's just what I would say to anybody, because I will say this, like as an executive coach who spends most of my time working in organizations, I do ask people, let's talk about the rest of your life. Like when we're goal setting for an engagement, we'll talk about the most important things they want to accomplish with work. And I'll ask them what else feels important to you. I give them the wheel of life as a tool to help them think
Yeah.
that through. It's a tool,
Yeah.
and you've talked
Yeah.
about in the show.
Mm.
And I will tell you, I would say certainly upwards of half of my clients say, I don't spend time with my friends. I don't even know if I have any friends anymore. So I think in order for any of us to see this change, and the evidence is very clear, as you've shared, and I'm sure you'll put in the show notes, that there's impact to our productivity and happiness at work and to our lives, more importantly, right? Like our health and our well-being. If we are committed to making it an important part of our lives, we have to take action. And that might be rekindling friendships, which is something I have done in the last couple of years, is reached out to 2 or 3 people who I missed. Time took its toll. And I just said that we don't have to let that happen. We can make a choice. And I reached out to 2 of them in particular, and we've seen each other a bunch and hung out and brought that back to life. And then I think as I've gotten older, I've also gotten more comfortable reaching out to people where we have an interest. Like, I know you would ask before we talk, like as someone who works for herself, how do you make friendships? And I do belong to a bunch of different business communities and like little squads of people who do things together, mostly are related to work, but I will make an effort if I notice that another woman on one of these Zooms, like we're always laughing at the same jokes, or we find, we have a similar kind of reaction to certain types of ideas that are presented to us. I'll send her a message and be like, hey, do you want to grab a virtual coffee later on? Just chat a little more. I'm willing to extend myself that way. That's been very helpful to me. And I think that it does stretch us a little personally to be vulnerable in that way and say like, hey, I kind of like what I see. You want to see if there's some friendship in there. And again, I don't think we're socialized to do it. We're not socialized to prioritize it in adulthood. We're so focused on our partners and our kids and our aging parents. But yeah, I have. And I think a lot of the people in my life and who I'm working with do, because it's part of building a rich life. It's not just about, work is a very important part of our lives. It's a very important part of my life, but it's not the only part. And if I want a full life, which I do, I'm going to have to put the work in. So I think it's available to all of us if we're willing to do it. And I think we just, same way we want to prioritize taking care of our health or taking care of our financial lives, we got to do the work.
Yes. And I will underscore what we talked about, though, those defenses that have gone up from having your heart broken by friends who you thought were friends, who, being a little gun shy, but then also the relationship analogy, like if you were dating, now we're talking about sort of more of the traditional heterosexual relationship, but a guy asking a woman out, they're always putting themselves out there, maybe, know that it's kind of like dating, maybe, you're going to have to put yourself out there, and you'll click with someone, and it's okay if it's not everyone, because maybe it's not meant to be.
Right.
And then I was also thinking there's this great clip with Oprah and Michelle Obama.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about how Oprah's like, bring your friends for whatever, some dinner thing. And she's like, how many people? And Michelle was like, 12. And Oprah's like, no, you don't, there's no way you have 12 good friends. And Michelle's like, no, I do. I've like cultivated them from like different parts of my life, and I really work on those. And Oprah's like, I've got Gail. Like, that's what I have. She's like, the only other person I knew who had 12 friends was Jesus, and one of them betrayed him, and it's so funny, right? It made me laugh too. And so, you can have the Oprah style. Maybe you have your Gail, and maybe that's good enough, because, I think the one thing that came out of I think was the Dan Buettner one, was that if you had 3 close people, and for me, my brothers are my friends. They fall into that community. They're like, I'm very blessed to have a soul family. And I know that is not the case for many people. I'm very blessed. My parents, my brothers, like, we are a soul family. I have my other wounds, but thankfully that was not a wound for me coming into this world. So I have my brothers. I can pick up, some of the advice they give me sometimes. I'm like, I'm so blessed. So like, I just
so wonderful.
Right. So to be able to think about that, you know what I mean? In terms of, who are those three? And if you've got your Gail, like,
Yeah. My girlfriend Courtney says all the time, we talk because our kids are the same age. She'll say to her daughters and my daughters, like her number is two. She's like, if you got two people you can call on, you're
yes.
living a great life. You're living a great life. And I think, just maybe the note I want to make in closing is like I think sometimes there's almost no domain of our lives where we don't compare ourselves to other people.
Yes.
And it can be very easy to look at other people who have those like long term, like you mentioned, the friend who you grew up with your whole life. Like, I don't have that. I don't have somebody. I mean, I know people my whole life, and there's some of them I exchange birthday cards with and stuff, but my intimates are for me mostly college and afterwards. Like I'm very close with my college friends. And I could easily go down the path of compare and despair and be like, oh, I want someone who knew me when I was 3. And I think, and I also have friends, like I have a very good friend who's like, I have no friends from college. Like college was fine for me. I'm like, I sometimes look at her, I'm like, what are you thinking? Like that was the best group of women I'll ever know in my life. But all to say, it's just like work or like how we look in a bathing suit. It's super easy to start comparing ourselves to other people. I wish I had that many friends, or I'd known them as long, or that we traveled together. We never I don't think that helps us at all. And just a note, and it's a note to myself as much as it is to anyone else, just ease up. Like your path is your path. You find your people, be so grateful you have them. Take good care of them. And it doesn't have to look the same for all of us.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. And like even my friend from birth, like we talk, a few times a year. And then when I go home, I try to see her. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
And that happens sometimes and it doesn't. So, but I know that she's there and she knows that I'm here. And we are sort of psychically connected too. It's just a whole other thing. She knows. Like, it's just so funny. Like I texted her out of the blue one day. I'm like, are you okay? She's like, I just got out of the hospital. My appendix burst. So I'm like, I knew something was wrong. I don't know. It's just so weird. So, and then, I have to give my friend Valerie a shout out too, because I've known her since we were 12. We were middle school that went into high school. And because of our last name, we sat next to each other. And then as we advanced into the honors and AP, so it was very funny, literally just by virtue of our last initial, it placed us in proximity enough to have that friendship. And so, yes, go find your people, put yourself out there. I think you're right. I think your friend's right. 2 friends, if you've got those 2, you're living a great life.
Beautiful life.
You do. And, if you're having a hard time, I do think finding common interest is one way, one avenue to at least know that you share that. And I think paying attention to values, not just what you do, like if it is a work thing, do you share work values? Great. But do you share core values, just like in a partner?
Yeah. I think that's right.
I think it's important because then you're maybe less likely to get burned down the road.
And you know what else I'll say? I think that, it's like I have a couple of friends who are single, and they're the ones who are successfully kind of getting out there and dating are often saying to us, like, when you meet someone who you think would be great for me, just don't be shy about introducing us. I wonder if we can borrow from that with friendship, because I was thinking about this recently. I had a friend who suffered an enormous loss recently. I flew to be with her as she was grieving, and there were a handful of other women who showed up for her. And I realized, like, I'd known some of them we'd met when the kids were small, and some of them I'd never met, but we'd heard of each other. And I realized then we found ourselves, and there was something, of course, that moment was just so difficult and so tragic. And we were all together to support her, and it will continue to be for a long time. But what I have found very, like, I guess, I don't know if it's a silver lining maybe, is how much we've come to love each other, this extended group of women. And you realize, I think it's been interesting to think about asking a friend to bring a friend, like introduce me to someone. If if I'm looking to have more social time in my life, if I'm looking, and I think about this a lot because I was reading in preparation for our conversation around how much work and children, as much as I love both so much, are some of the reasons we spend less time on friendship. I'm like, okay, if anyone's now prioritizing having more friendship in my life, we need a hand. We might need someone to say, we get along so great. We have such a great time. You want to bring someone else to lunch next time we get together. Or if we're going to go on a hike, bring someone you think I might enjoy, because it's like we would do it for dating. So why wouldn't we do it for friendship?
I love that. And
like a multiplier.
Thinking of friends who might be, so like my friend Jen is British. She lives here in California. She's probably the only woman that I added on, like, as a dear friend, where to the point where there was a school trip for a competition our daughters were in Sacramento. And my daughter was like, Mom, when you're with Jenny, you laugh like I do with my friends. And I'm so grateful to have somebody who I can laugh with and have those deep conversations with. So like, you're going to find different people bring the different things. And then, and my friend Maria Elena and I were in theater together. She moved out to California and we stayed in, I ran into her in New York City randomly, like so randomly. And
I also love that.
Yeah, but was it random? And I told her how I wanted to move to California, and she moved to California, and we stayed in touch. And she lives in LA, and we connect when we get a chance. So, I think there's this assumption that with friendships, you're talking to them every day, you're doing all these things. No, it's your people, and then how much you actually do, or how social you are, how much you get out there, is really about really taking stock of how much you need and desire, and calibrating that. Because sometimes I don't leave my house. You know what I mean? Unless Jenny will be like, let's go do this. And I'm like, oh yeah. Or you know what I mean? So it's even as an extrovert, sometimes
I'm the same way. I mean, I'm quite extroverted, but I'm also quite tired. So I'll often my evenings, I'm often I'm done. I worked a long day, hung out with the kids, went to the gym, saw some friends for lunch or whatever. And then I want to be done. And my best friend lives 2 towns away. And has her social drive is so much greater than mine. And she'll often be like, no, I'm coming over, or you're coming here, and we're going to hang out a little bit because we haven't done it in a week and it's too long. And, you need a little kick.
Sometimes you need a little kick. Yeah. And some of your friends are good at that. My friend Jenny is good at that. What are you doing right now? Let's go meet for a coffee. And I'm like, I've got to do, okay, I'm meeting you.
Yeah. If you left me my own devices, I'd be back in my sweatpants and on the couch with my book, which is fine. But, I guess it just comes down to what you want. Right? What do you want out of your life, and how do you want to integrate friendship into your life? And then what are you willing to work at in order to have, it's a goal. It's any goal. Yeah. You want to have rewarding, rich friendships, and you want to be able to travel and have great times with your friends. You got to put the work in, you got to prioritize it and say no to other things to make it happen.
Yes. And if you've been wounded by friends, we have, I feel you. I get it. Nayla, we get it really, truly. Yes. And put yourself out there and know that there are great people, just like if you were dating. So I loved this conversation. I always love all of ours. But I have to ask you, just for fun, because I like you. What does living a good life mean to you?
I will tell you that for me, it means paying attention to myself, self-honoring, and as well as for my family, just not getting too busy to pay attention to what's really happening. And then being deliberate about what happens next. And then I'm really deepening my practice around gratitude, deliberately practicing that. And so that has been revealing some wonderful things in the last couple of days. So that's been great. That's for me, that's where I am right now.
I love it. I love connecting with you. You're so lovely. And such a rich and interesting and fun conversation. I knew this would be fun. We kind of had a roadmap and we didn't do any of it. And that's what I love about it. So that's what's so good about it.
This was fantastic.
I think it was just right.
So much gold. Yeah. I
right.
It.
No, totally. Yeah. And honestly, friendships are so important. And so I support that. I still desire more, in that and richening that. And I support any of you out there, and feel free to reach out. All of the show notes for today will be over at thegoodlifecoach.com. Be sure to share this with a friend. And get the conversation going. And Nayla, where do I direct people to connect with you? Where do you hang out?
Well, I hang out on LinkedIn a lot because I am a professional executive coach, but I also come to my website, naylabahri.com. It's naylabahri.com. And then you can connect to LinkedIn, Instagram, my newsletter, if I'm speaking in your area or on another podcast like this, or sharing an episode of my podcast, The Inside Job, which I would love to have people listen to. So thank you. Of
course. And all of those links will be in the show notes at thegoodlifecoach.com to make it easy to find Nayla. Loved being with you today.
Always such a pleasure.
So much fun. So much fun. Thank you, Nayla.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you gained some new information or inspiration for your life. That the essence of this show is to really wake up to what's possible for you, to reclaim your beautiful voice, and to really learn to love and prioritize yourself. So if you gained any value from any of the conversations you've tuned into, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. You can do that right now on your phone. And please do consider leaving a rating and review if you have yet to do so on Apple Podcasts. It's actually how more women can find the show. And I really want to grow a community of women who are loving themselves and living full on. So thank you as always for tuning in. And I look forward to reconnecting with you next Wednesday. Bye for now.